Phil Lee. Phil, will you come forward? And former legislator. He is the leader of the Family Coalition Party of Ontario. He's 28 years in the Ontario school system as a teacher, a graduate of the California State Christian University, and served on the faculty of the University of Toronto, and has been making the rounds in the state of Hawaii. Somebody thought that Phil Lee was a rock star or something. Thank you for coming tonight.
It's an honor to be here. It is. Actually, the reason why I was asked was because in Canada in 2005, we approved same-sex marriage. We went through process of change, and at a
mic closer. Yeah.
And at a conference that I was at a couple of weeks ago, I shared with some residents here about what happened, and they said, "Man, can you come back?" So I came back, and we're kind of doing the rounds, and we have a PowerPoint presentation that we're sharing with people. But basically what it comes down to is this. Prior to same-sex marriage being approved in Ontario, when it comes to sensitive curriculum for whether it be people of faith or even just people who raise their children from traditional values, in the 1980s, there was very little conflict. The odd novel that came up, but then the school system respected the requests of parents, and an alternative would be given and be granted. In the 1990s, same-sex marriage, before same-sex marriage in the 1990s, comprehensive sex education started to move in. That wasn't a requirement. It wasn't part of the curriculum, but what it was new ideas coming in from the universities that were actually being promoted to the universities, and kind of through pressure from outside organizations said teens are going to be sexually active, so if they're going to be sexually active, then we're going to have to teach them how to use contraceptives. We're going to have to introduce them to alternative sexual activities, homosexuality, anal and oral sex, because kids don't get pregnant that way. And that was the justification for it, used in Ontario. And but it was not curriculum in the sense that it was written up in the government documentation, but what it was supplementary curriculum that teachers could bring into the classroom. And when parents expressed concern about this, the Ministry of Education and the school board said teachers have the authority to bring into the classroom materials that go beyond the minimum expectations of the government curriculum based on their assessment of the needs of the students. So parents, though, at that time said, but this is of concern to us. We'd like to be informed. And as a result, Ontario passed similar policy as Hawaii to inform parents of sensitive curriculum. And so that was great. At that time, the government was responding to the requests of people, and people were informed. In 2005, when we passed same-sex marriage, though, what happened was we put in place Safety in Schools Act. The Safety in Schools Act mandated that the school board build under the guise of anti-discrimination, mandated school boards to build positive relationships with the LGBT community and have them present in the schools. And I'm not 100% opposed to that. You know, I mean, they're people in the community, as long as, you know, activists aren't using that for, you know, to guide and direct. But then principals in this same piece of legislation, principals, when they are dealing with students that have been victimized in school, need to inform parents of the incident that has taken place, unless the student self-identifies as homosexual and the principal is concerned that the parent may not honor the feelings of the student. In that case, the principal is to send the child to counseling from the LGBT organizations to support the child's and honor the child's feelings without informing the parents. And there's no lower age limit placed on this. Okay? Following that, we passed the Equity and Inclusive Education Strategy, and you have to understand the term equity does not mean equality. Equity means that we can put in place policies, procedures, strategies, and curriculum to address the needs of a discriminated group, even if that action discriminates against everyone else in society. And that's Ministry of Education definition. And actually, that definition didn't originate there. It originated with a group called GELSON, Gay, Lesbian, Straight Educators Network, which created a manual back in the 1990s to advocate for their needs, to address the discrimination, and their focus is to influence schools, influence curriculum, et cetera. I think it's important that you have a look at this and who's influencing our school system once you approve same-sex marriage. The terms of reference document, the Equity Inclusive Education Strategy, is a guideline for revising curriculum. We must revise the curriculum to make it LGBT affirming. And as a result, the first curriculum that was revised was the sexual health curriculum. And in grade 1, what was recommended is we're going to introduce the students. Students in grade 1 would have to be able to identify the genitalia of the male and female. And I don't mean just, yeah, that's a male, that's a female. Actually label the parts. Grade 2, we're going to talk about gender fluidity. The fact that being male or female or your gender has little to do with your physical anatomy, but more to do with the clothes you wear, the music you listen to, the activities you participate in, Ministry of Education definition, and that your gender can change. We're talking about teaching this in grade 2 students that are 7 and 8. Then in grade 2, we also have a unit called Both And, which is a cross-dressing unit where we read about a person who is a gender-neutral person. They can experiment with living as a girl, as a boy. Then we have a cross-dressing center in the class, and they can experiment with being a girl, being a boy. The idea is that your gender is fluid and that you can change at any time. Along with that, our school boards have changed the policies on washroom, change room, and shower facilities, that they can be used by any person that relates to that particular gender. It's not identified to their physical anatomy. In grade, so that's grade 2. Grade 3, another example. So is I get a phone call from a grandparent who says, my grandson just married his best friend Jimmy. This is grade 3. So what happened? Grade 3 class, this teacher reads the book, Daddy's Wedding. There's about 2 men who get married. A person dressed in as a cleric comes in, says, in Canada, isn't it fantastic? We live in a country where, and it goes beyond knowledge, live in a country where people of the same gender can get married. I'm here to tell you about that. And who's your best friend? Who would you like to marry? We have a mass same-sex wedding ceremony and celebrate with cake and ice cream. So those are examples of lessons. Once we've passed the equity strategy, then the government of Ontario passed legislation, because all of this is policy, it's strategy, it's not legislation. But in 2012, as a result of pressure from the LGBT community, we passed our Accepting Schools Act, Bill 13. Bill 13 put all of these changes into legislation, mandating them into legislation. As a matter of fact, the Minister of Education, when introducing the policy, said the intent of the policy is to change the traditional norms and values of society and change them for good. And what I'm sharing with you is what's happened in Ontario, but other countries, I have colleagues in Britain, Tasmania, Australia, in Connecticut, et cetera, say we're following a similar track, Phil. So, so this legislation, if you're going to change the traditional norms and values of society, you're going to have to have some significant strategies. Strategies in the legislation are, 1, mandating GSA clubs, Gay Straight Alliance clubs in the schools, and number 2, integrating into the curriculum positive, affirmative LGBT messaging, every subject, every grade level, and actually the term that's often referred to is every subject, every grade, every day. I'm not saying it happens every day, but so now what happens is instead of the curriculum being sensitive curriculum coming in at some times where parents can say, I'd like to know about maybe some novels, or I know sex ed could be sensitive, could you inform me about that? Now it's very difficult for parents to identify when this might come in. And our question is, we've taken the sensitive curriculum, which used to take place in health class, which might be a few classes a year, and now we're integrating it throughout the year, and parents are asking, can I be informed? And the Challenging Homophobia and Heterosexism document, which has 12 lessons at every grade level on how to integrate this into the classroom, page 10, frequently asked questions, says teachers are not allowed to inform parents about sensitive curriculum, because you're creating an inclusive education classroom, and and to inform affirms the discrimination of that faith group. So, and now when it comes to having faith clubs in our schools, principals, when students come in and ask, principals are saying, no, we can't have faith clubs because your faith is not consistent with the values of the GSA club. So
We'd like to, I know you could go on.
Absolutely.
But we'd like to get some questions.
Sure.
We'll start down at Richard. Would you like to ask some questions? You don't want to ask again? Okay, thank you.
Shoot, where do you start here?
You want to formulate and we'll go down?
Yeah.
Karen, would you like to ask some questions?
I'll pass right now.
Okay.
Well,
Do you
let
have
me.
a question? No, he just got it back.
Okay, let me ask this. When it comes to the gender differences, okay, and you can wake up and we've kind of passed similar legislation here in the state of Hawaii where you can wake up and say I feel like a woman today, and then right, and then tomorrow you wake up, I say I feel like a man today, and then you be a man. If you do genetic testing, you essentially can identify whether the person you're testing their DNA is whether they're male or female.
correct.
Now, if it comes to, and I'll take this back to the Native Hawaiian issue as well, is if your identity is related more to the kind of music you listen to, or things like that, how much more difficult is it to make the leap where your lineage or your heritage is no longer what's important, it's what you feel like you are? So will the courts be able to no longer say that, okay, we have Native Hawaiian rights and we have to do away with those because your identity is dependent on the kind of music you listen to, what you do?
I'm not an expert on legal issues. I'm just sharing what's happened in Ontario to our education system. I do see, however, it often leads to confusion in our kids. And I'm not saying we can't respect people who, are different. Absolutely. No, we do respect that. But, for example, my son has a lot of interests that are consistent with the description that I have. He loves fashion, he's a designer, he's et cetera. But he says, Dad, I'm still a guy. I don't want people, and he says, I go to school and they're telling me I'm queer. They're telling me I'm not a guy. So I don't like that. Because their definition doesn't fit me. That's just a personal example,
Phil, I want to go back to the empirical basis of information.
Sure.
Some of these things you said sound almost like exaggerations.
Close to me.
Yep.
Are these real things where 2 and 3 years old who are actually asked to
Grade
get
2 and
married?
3. Grade 2 and
Three?
3. Yes.
Is that
So
act-
7, 8 years old.
Is that
I've had the
optional
phone
or-
calls. Yeah. This is not, again, this is not required curriculum. Okay. Because what happens is when the government changes the curriculum, they did this with the health. They put it on the website, and in the legislature, Toronto Centre, MPP, and others said, and the right-wing rural homophobes screw it up for us. And that's exactly what was said in the legislature. Because those who are more traditionally minded complain about the curriculum. So instead of changing the curriculum the ministry way, they create a teacher resource document on how to integrate this 12 subjects. So they're kind of subversive with this. Since it's a teacher resource document, it's not on the school board's websites. But when we have inclusive education instruction, this is the document that is referenced. And this is the document the teachers are using in the province. So this is what's coming.
The second question is, why not an opt-out provision, which you turned kind of on its head and said that if you let parents opt out their kids, that would be considered a discrimination?
What I've been told, 2 things. One, teachers have been told, once you come to this system, parents have been told, you put on the cloak, you take off the faith cloak, and it's been said in meetings, I've been in there, You take off the faith cloak, you put on the cloak of the Ontario Human Rights Commission Provincial Code of Conduct, and you operate with that code of conduct until you leave. And that also means that churches no longer are supposed to be renting space in school facilities because they can't operate under that code of conduct.
I have a question, Mom.
One more. Sure.
Did your private school enrollment spike in Ontario or in Canada?
Our private school enrollment is gradually increasing. Our homeschooling numbers are gradually increasing, absolutely, in part because of this. Yes.
So
But can I just share something? When they passed the Accepting Schools Act, the Ontario Human Rights Commission, similar to your civil rights, said, and once we fix, and that was the term she used, the secular and Catholic schools, because this applies to Catholic schools also, then private schools will be next, because in Ontario, certification is dependent upon private schools teaching 75% of the curriculum. And so their goal will be to change the curriculum to the point where the private schools would not be able to be consistent. But anyway, she said, once we fix the secular public and the Catholic schools, private schools are next. And Alberta had legislation that was going to be passed first and second reading, that homeschooling families would not be allowed to integrate any faith into the subject area between 9 and 3 or when their instruction was. But the only reason why the legislation didn't pass was because it died because an election was called. So that this is the direction, and it's all and we have a case where a family has been refused to be accommodated, and it's in the courts right now.
So if you're a poor family,
Yeah.
that has values, traditional values, and you don't want to send them to a public institution,
That's right.
which is teaching them these things, you're SOL.
You're absolutely right. We have the organization that I also represent, called Peace, advocates for families of faith, and we are often there in the school boards advocating for them and to be accommodated.
Phil, we got 5. You're going to stick around, or you have to go to another presentation?
I have to be a presentation. Actually, I probably don't have to start till about 7:30.
Okay, well, we'll do you 5 more minutes. Representative Ward, go ahead. And
Okay.
I've got 2 questions.
Well, you mentioned civil rights. I wanted to mention, just for the record, that Bill Hoshijo was invited for this evening, but he had a former engagement and couldn't make it because the Civil Rights of Hawaii is a very active and very prominent organization. So thank you for citing that.
I've got 2 questions for you. First of all, I agree with you. We've got to love our homosexual brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
And treat them with respect and dignity.
Absolutely.
I have lived that in my life. I was, as a father of 8, though, and 4 children still in public school, the concerns I had was about the education system. And I wrote the superintendent a letter about Dick and Jane books. Now, you and I are both old enough to remember Dick and Jane books.
I do.
And some of the folks in here, those of us who are long in the tooth, they don't have them anymore. They call it something else. But the point is, in a Dick and Jane book, if it shows a mom and dad, all of a sudden now we pass this law, right? We will immediately have a lawsuit that, if not a lawsuit, they'll do it on their own, some of the progressive folks, and will say, you know, you have to show all aspects of it. And you'll have Dick has 2 daddies or Jane has 2 mommies without the parents being told, correct? Because it will then be the law. Is that a fair assumption?
Actually, I think in Massachusetts, the federal courts ruled that parents did not need to be informed about sensitive curriculum because of the passing of same-sex marriage. Yes.
And we have and part of the answer I got was a non-answer. I asked 6 pertinent, precise questions as best I can as a non-lawyer, and some of the answers were, well, this is covered by our controversial policy. But once same-sex marriage becomes a law of the land,
Yes.
it's the law of the land, correct?
That's right.
And it's no longer controversial.
Well, it's still controversial, but it's the law of the
Technically.
land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So parents don't. Yeah. So parents don't have a say. I did ask one question, and not to be inflammatory, but this is serious business, like you said.
Absolutely.
And we see what's going on in California with the transgender situation. And I said, well, I asked them, will a transgender student and or teacher be allowed to use the same shower, locker room facilities as people of the opposite sex?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer I got from the Board of Education, and I quote, we put the needs of the students first,
That's
unquote.
That's right.
Which students?
You're right.
They didn't answer me. Which
You're right.
students? And they
Absolutely.
ignored the teacher component of it. So you're saying that even though Canada is not part of the United States, this is what we can expect.
In Ontario, different school boards have passed the same policy, that students may use whichever washrooms, change rooms, shower facilities that is consistent with their gender identity.
Okay.
And that can fluctuate from day to day.
It can, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're going to get those students who want to have a hoot and say, no, I feel like a girl this day,
You
or
mean
whatever.
teenagers do that sort of stuff?
Can I just share one other thing with you?
Yes.
Okay. With the passage of same-sex, prior to same-sex marriage, the community had input in the sexual health curriculum. Okay. When we had some things that we felt were a conflict, they respected our input, and the curriculum in my own city, Hamilton, became more abstinence-based as a result, and public health responded to the research, and as a result, teen pregnancies, we had the highest pregnancy rate in the province of Ontario, but it dropped 20%. But since same-sex marriage now, we have other organizations that are involved. They're not accepting the input of faith community, and I'd like to just share with you some documentation that's now available in our high schools, okay? This one is called My Sex Life, Info for Young POS People, which are people who are positive, HIV positive, and it talks in here about my right to have fantastic sex, okay? And it does talk about your responsibilities, but I mean, anyway, you can have a look at it, or I can
Please,
get you a
please.
copy,
Yeah.
okay?
You-
I can get you a copy.
Okay.
This other one, and that's produced with federal dollars from our AIDS Committee of Toronto. This is a deck of sex cards, okay? And it lists various sexual acts on here and I've been advocating for the faith community on the sex issues for 17 years, and this just came out this year, and this stuff I've never seen before.
Mhm.
And, I don't want to offend anybody by reading them, but
Right.
if you would like, I can get you a copy of those, okay?
Thank you.
And again, it has to do with who's in control. And now when the faith community or traditional families ask to be informed, they're told no, they don't have the right. The same thing is happening in Britain, The Bottom Line. It's a pamphlet on male-to-male sexual activities, including inserting a fist in the lower orifice to massage the prostate, but they avoid the pornography by using male dolls, okay?
Thank you.
And so
So you're saying this is real?
absolutely, and it's not just Ontario; it's happening globally. And there's a pattern that's followed, and it is being directed to a great degree by an organization founded in the United States called Gelson, and it was headed up. It was founded by Kevin Jennings, President Obama's education, I guess, head of the NEA,
Right.
and so.
Bill,
So-
thank you so very much. I don't mean to cut you short.
Thank you.
We have some fantastic guys who got to catch a plane.